Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again for another episode of Leadership Conversations. My name is Florin Lungu, and I'm so delighted to be with you this morning. And this morning, I'm joined by a wonderful friend, a guest, Kris Granger. I learned to say that well. So Kris is digital experience manager at Volvo Group. He's teaching marketing at the University of Gothenburg, and he published his recent book on storytelling for brands. And today we're just excited to have Kris on the show. Kris, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, Florin. This is really a privilege.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for joining us. So give us a bit of a background for someone that doesn't know who Kris is. The Reader's Digest version.
Just Kris, as you can see from the Trinidad and Tobago flag behind me, I'm from the Caribbean, and I moved to Sweden about 5 years ago. I moved here and continued teaching at the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business, University of the West Indies, with students in Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, and I really came into Sweden with this sort of love affair with marketing, and I wanted to continue to pursue my practice and my research and my teaching in marketing. And I think all that to say that Kris is a teacher, Kris is in love with marketing, and Kris is an island boy who is sitting very cold in the Swedish winter now.
Well, we're grateful to have you in Sweden, and you bring not only talent but marketing expertise, and you're shaping the kind of the view on marketing, at least in the Gothenburg area, through your work at university and also with your engagement with Volvo. So let's kind of look into how can we merge a bit marketing and leadership, or what can we learn from marketing for leaders. What would be kind of your definition of outstanding leadership? Like, how would you define leadership?
I really believe that leadership is the ability to bring people along into the future, moving people into a desirable future. And I think that there is a really key connection in moving people into a future and being able to tell the story of that future. Some of the greatest leaders that we've known have told us stories about the future. Martin Luther King, Steve Jobs, of course, Nelson Mandela, Jesus. I just actually realized that John C. Maxwell wrote a book about Jesus's leadership style, which I think is quite interesting. I will read it. I haven't read it yet. And so I really, and Jesus, of course, is known as a storyteller. So is Martin Luther King. So I think that leadership is a lot more about telling stories and being able to structure the future of where we are well.
Yeah, I think you agree. And part of, I think when we look at leadership, when it evolved and emerged as a practice, before that, we were kind of following Peter Drucker, who was kind of the godfather of management, right? So we were looking at managing people, managing systems. But the difference between a manager and a leader is the ability of that leader to be a few steps ahead of the team and then be able to storytell or to cast a vision that inspires people to follow. So I think you're spot on that kind of confirms the things we see and the role of a leader. And I'm thinking, when you're involved in leadership, or when people call you in different leadership rooms, what do they call you for? Like, what kind of problems they're trying to solve? And they say, hey, Kris was probably having a view on this, so let's invite Kris there.
Well, personally, I think that my contribution in my daily work, or my contribution to the teams and the leaders that I work with, is around big picture thinking. And usually there are quite a number of different topic areas or subject matter areas that are involved in a decision. And when I'm in the room, it's typically to string those areas together and see the wider picture, and also to look a little bit into the future about what does the current state of this complex picture we're in now, what is likely to happen next, or what is the story we're telling ourselves as we take a next step into what is typically an uncertain future.
Wow. So you're helping leaders to kind of connect the dots and kind of create a story, if I kind of get it right, to create a story that they could then share with the teams, and
Yeah.
that inspires the team to kind of move towards that desired future.
Yeah, specifically with my work, it's both looking back, looking around, and looking forward, and articulating the story that is being told. What is the story that's coming out of the data in a particular circumstance, or from a year in review, or from a campaign? What is the story of what's going on in the world right now, and how do we fit as a character in that story, in the global ecosystem? And then what is the story of how we're pushing forward into the future? So, and not typically stories come together from many different angles, and I want to talk a little bit after this about the what I call the storytelling triad in my book, how we break down stories. But yeah, when we're speaking about what I do practically, it's usually that sort of piecing together of the small pieces so that we can have a big story, a big picture that we're all looking at together.
Wow, that's so valuable. Absolutely, we're going to dive into the triad in your book, but I think I want to unpack something you just mentioned. So you mentioned, what is the story that the data tells us? And I think that's an interesting kind of association, because we don't put data and stories together. Usually we say, well, you're data driven, or you're kind of feeling or stories driven. So give us a bit of a, like, I think that's very important, because I want people not to miss that, right? You're
Yeah.
saying, there's a story that data is telling us, and how do you use that? Like, give us a bit of a, unpack that a bit for us.
So we can look at a data set, we can look at a number of data points that explain a situation. And so let me see if I could bring this home. In a campaign, in a marketing campaign, we can see how many people liked this, and how many people were aware of that, or how many people clicked on this. And we can just see that data. But the number of people who clicked on a particular item, who exist in a particular context or country, or who have been warmed up in this particular way, tells a story of why they might have clicked on it, as opposed to just the story of how many people clicked on it. Really, we're thinking about what is the nuance, what is the interesting piece of this data that can help us make a decision. And typically, when we're thinking about stories, we're thinking about, and I'm getting a bit into the triad here, but we're thinking about the cultural context in which the data is being read. We're thinking about the emotional context that we would have created in the creative and in the campaign, and we're thinking about the social context that the campaign would have existed in. And so when we're looking for a story in the data, we have to place the data points in that environment so that we can appreciate really what is happening, that is not just data points. I think I could probably explain that better, but that's what I got.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if I would try to put this in other words, like for people like me that are not expert in marketing, what would actually mean is that if you get a number of people, clicking on a campaign in Sweden, and a similar number in, let's say, the US, that may mean completely different things, because when you put in the cultural, emotional, and social context, those things mean different things. And that's kind of the story we want to get, the story behind the numbers.
Precisely. Exactly that.
Wow. Thank you. And this actually, I have a guy that I follow in marketing. His name is Mike Kim, and he has a saying. He says, "If content is king, the context is the kingdom."
Exactly.
And it sounds like you're into the same thing. Like you're putting the data, which people say data is king. You need to know your numbers into the context, which becomes the kingdom in which the data or the king exists or
Yeah.
reigns.
Yeah, we must understand the cultural, social, and emotional context that the data fits into.
Yeah, and we see already we have some engagement and some comments already popping up, which is great. So let's. I want to dive into the book, but I would like to kind of know, when you're speaking to leaders, what do you see that they over focus many times, and other times they're maybe underinvest or ignore or not pay enough attention to?
This is going to sound cliche, but it's the story. I think that leadership really truly relies so much on inspiring people to take the next step forward and promising them essentially that when they take that step, that their hands will be held and that they won't slip or that they will be okay. And leaders have to be willing to say that they believe in a future that looks like this. They believe in it. And yes, of course, there is data that they have to use to support that, and there is situational analysis that they would use to support that. But what I've found is the leader who is unwilling to 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 stick his or her neck out and say, this is what I believe the future is going to look like. I think those leaders are lacking. And then it's not just about unwillingness. There may be a lack of capability to structure a conversation about the future. So again, going back to the cultural, emotional, and social context of everyone, of a story, when we're speaking about the future, when we're delivering a hope for the future or a vision of the future, we need to be able to deliver it through the lens of the culture of the audience, and through the lens of the audiences, the way the audience sees themselves in community, and the way they feel that and the neurochemical triggers that show up in their body when a vision of the future is told. So it's two things really. It's that willingness to own the future, and also the capability to communicate that future. And I think that is something that I would long to equip leaders more with, but also to remind them that putting your head in the mud like an ostrich is definitely the antithesis of leadership. We must be able to lead, and we're seeing leaders towing the line sort of thing, and that's really not leadership. Like, as you said before, that might be more management.
Yeah, that's so good, and I see similar things, and one of the application of the storytelling and being able to tell a story of the future is that many leaders may be good at painting a picture, but what I found sometimes the biggest difference is that they're not able to help the people see themselves into the picture. So meaning, like, you paint a picture, but people are all kind of, okay, you talk about a big vision, and they are kind of stuck into their day to day and say, I understand you want to get there, but the computer is not working or the software is bugged, and so you need to try to actually take them out of that day to day kind of struggles and place them, say, and here is what your role would be, or here is what I expect you to do, or here is how you could help us, or here is what we need of you. And I feel that part. So first of all, using storytelling to be able to paint the picture, but then also use similar stories to be able to say, hey, here is what your role is going to be, here is what you're going to do, here is what you're going to do, and that's how we can win as a team. And I think that's a gap that leaders need to close.
Yeah, and there is something I heard from Jordan Peterson. He was referring specifically to relationships, but I mean, leadership is a relationship as well. And he spoke about the story we're telling ourselves. And I think he said something like once a week, every couple should sit together and ask each other, what is the story I'm telling myself about this relationship and about the life that we're living together? And I think that as a leader, we need to have those types of coaching sessions and understand what is the story I'm telling myself and what is the story you are telling yourself about the situation that you're in, about the work that we're doing, and allow for the people within your charge to be self-driven and be aligned with that story that they are telling themselves and the story that you are trying to tell them.
Wow, that's so good, and it's perfectly applicable to leadership. And how many of us really do that?
Yeah.
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 So thank you so much. That's spot on. Thank you. So let's now switch to your book now a bit. So you wrote the book Storytelling for Brands. This went out, I think, October last year. Like, what frustration led you to or prompt you to write that book?
I have been teaching content strategy at the University of the West Indies for 10 years, and that topic, content strategy, evolved. We used to call it content curation and creation, content strategy, and eventually in the last 5 years we changed the name to Storytelling for Brands. And the class was typically oversubscribed. I taught it at a master's level, at a professional certificate level, and at a workshop level, and it would typically be 25 people, 40 people, and I'm teaching that class over and over again. And I realized how insatiable for knowledge, for this type of work, many marketers, leaders, managers will. And I really wanted to extend the reach of the information that I have found in my 10 years of research doing this. And I feel like marketing and storytelling has a pretty bad rep in some instances. People think about marketing as manipulation or Machiavellianism and that type of thing. And certainly powerful tools in the wrong hands will always be used for wrong. But we needed to ensure that the powerful tools were in the right hands. And I really wanted to give people a deep insight into what storytelling really is from a biological and biochemical perspective, and from a deeply social and anthropological perspective, and then from a cultural perspective. So the book followed my teaching in the classroom that explored some really deep bits of knowledge, which I really thought should be required reading for all marketers. So the frustration that I was trying to, I guess, ease was this idea that I needed more people to understand marketing at a deeper, more human level.
Wow, and we're so grateful you're putting your message out there, and I'm sure you're gonna change people's lives. It's so powerful. Is there any leadership assumptions or beliefs that you challenge in that book, like something that leaders believe that you challenge intentionally, because we need to be challenged to kind of see what you see?
I went into the book trying to address a trending topic of virality, and that virality is spontaneous and cannot really be planned. And I wanted to almost create a formula for virality. I wanted to be able to say, if you utilize this formula, there's a very high probability that the content that you put out would resonate and be measurably resonant on social networks. So I challenged that storytelling is something that happens by flukes, or is something that you inherit, or is something that is natural. I really brought to the forefront the fact that storytelling is something that can be learned. It's a skill that can be honed, and it can be measurably impactful if done well.
Wow. Tell us the formula of virality.
It's the storytelling triad. It's understanding that people exist in a cultural context, one, which means that they have to, every story must speak to identity signals. What are the things in a cultural context that people see themselves in? The next one is that every story must fit within a social context. When we think about FOMO, fear of missing out, it plays on the biological pathway, or the neurological pathway, that is what is called the social brain. Dr. Matthew Lieberman writes about it in his book Social. What is called the social brain, where the part of your brain that feels left out when friends don't call you, or when you're not picked for a team, is the same part of your brain that processes physical pain. So those people who feel FOMO are actually experiencing a type of pain, because that makes them want to move. So appreciating how your story situates people into a social context where there is risk of being left out is also quite important. And finally, it's the neurochemical, the endocrinological, or essentially the emotional context that you're able to step into. So we need to appreciate that there are words that can trigger hormones. So, for example, and also there are ways that you can structure your speech to trigger different types of biochemicals. So I can trigger cortisol, which would bring about stress in your body based on certain words that I use. So if I appreciate that ability to trigger different emotions, oxytocin, the feeling of love, or stress, or bring about different emotions through triggering different chemicals, through using different words and spacing and pausing, then I couple that with my understanding of the social context and the cultural context, then the content that is created can physically be felt in the bodies of the users. And when people feel things, they act. And when they act, your message goes viral. That's the formula.
Wow.
Read the book. If it doesn't, if it didn't land so well, guys.
No, it landed. It landed. I mean, for me, it landed very, very well. Of course, yeah. If you need if you need to unpack that, get a copy of the book, right? Get a copy of, hold that up a bit for people to see how that looks like. It's available on Amazon, right? People can get it from Amazon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what this tells me, it tells me that I need to be much more intentional about my content creation if I really want to know or be aware of and be strategic about the emotion that I am triggering in people, so then they take the action that I think they should be taking, or the purpose of my content. And that, I mean, I know in the Maxwell Leadership we talk, we're very strategic about our public speaking skills, and we're learning that from John Maxwell. But now you're taking it to the next level. We're not talking about. We know, I think, public speakers like John Maxwell knows more or less what works and what doesn't because of his experience. But you're now putting the science behind it into kind of the how the brain will react, what is the neurochemical that we're going to trigger, and what is the most likely action people are going to take based on that, or what's the emotion. Yeah, that's then I probably need to read your book.
Probably.
Yeah. So if I read the book, if I read your book, and I take one idea from that book, what that idea should be, like, what should I take from your book and implement?
That storytelling is is faceted, that it's not a, a very, it's not overly simplistic, but it's also not unnatural for us, that we have been telling stories for the entirety of our humanity, is what separates us from other life forces on earth. Our ability to communicate and move people, move communities, and lead people into the future is storytelling, and it is what has made us such a powerful species. And our understanding of how a good story is told is really the difference between our momentum, or the pace of momentum that we're able to have, whether it's fast or slow or not. And that's basically it, that it is in fact the most powerful tool, the most powerful communication tool that we have, and we can all learn it.
Yeah, I think that the last thing you just shared there, that's what I think people should take from it, because many times, like leadership, we think leaders are born, that they have some skills and abilities that they're born with, and some people are leaders, some people are not. But leadership and storytelling and public speaking are definitely learnable skills. So yes, having some talent helps, but then you still need to develop that talent. You cannot just, sit on it.
Yeah.
All right, it's been wonderful. Let's kind of close with a couple of questions that are a bit more personal. So a question that I like to ask my guest is, what is the best leadership or the best advice you ever got in your life, and how did that help you or shape your life?
Oh gosh, I've gotten a lot of great leadership advice. I mean, I read a lot of leadership books, as well. You know, John Maxwell, Deepak Chopra has a great book called The Soul of Leadership. And I mean, both my parents were entrepreneurs, so I had a really great grounding of advice. But I want to give a quote from Jay-Z, that I keep close to me all the time. He said in a song, "True kings don't die, we multiply." Now, Jay-Z, the billionaire entertainment mogul, sports entertainment husband to Beyonce, I think that concept, "True kings don't die, we multiply," it drives me, and it really defines leadership. I started this podcast with you saying that I am a teacher, and I see myself as a teacher, and I think that anyone who is attempting to lead a community has to see it from the perspective of empowering the people around you to tell their own stories. So leadership is not about creating followers, it's about creating other leaders. And so that's something that I really hold close to me.
Wow. So true kings don't die, they multiply.
Yeah.
Right on. What are you excited about? What are you excited about right now and for 2026?
I am excited about the greatest technological shift that has happened in my generation. I think the agentic world is I heard myself say yesterday that every system must be audited. Every system must be audited in today's agentic world, because no system would continue to operate in the way that it did before AI. And so we have to rethink everything. And for someone who likes to think about things a lot, it's very stimulating and very exciting for me to think about the fact that everything must be audited. And so I'm excited about my work in corporate Europe and corporate Sweden. I'm excited about the ability to create more content. I'm excited about meeting more people. I'm just excited about scaling everything, because this is such a great time to be alive.
Wow. Thank you so much for the inspiration. You're so inspiring. And I believe you're absolutely spot on with AI. It's going to shape everything we do, and it's probably going to impact our lives more than we think or want. And we didn't ask for it. It's here, but we have to live with it, like with social media and everything else. So it was wonderful to have you on the show, Kris. I want just to shout out to all the people engaging in the comment, from Vin to Richie to Confidence to Neil to Vedran to Neil again, Fabio and Giselle and everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for engaging. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Kris and I will go through the questions and answer those on LinkedIn and the other platforms you're watching. Thank you so much, Kris. Is there anything else you want to share before we kind of end today?
It's been my pleasure, and I just want to reflect your sentiment. Thank you for everyone who showed up and who watched live, and those who will watch on repeat. I really it's really nice to have this conversation going, and I'm just grateful for it. And I wish everyone a great day today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kris. Thank you everyone for tuning in. See you on the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.